right. Well, good morning. I'm getting ready to get up and start the day very soon. Rocky's asleep in his box, and he's always happy to be asleep in his box. My hair looks really strange, doesn't it? That high forehead look isn't the greatest. Anyway, good thing I wear a hat most of the time. Anyway, it's kind of cold out today, apparently, but it is sunny. And I just turned off the heater a little while ago because it was getting too hot in here. And there's no point wasting propane, which is expensive. Um, I want to talk about something, though, that I find interesting. And I find this is an interesting thing that I've observed in society. And I had a good example of it today in my personal life. Um, Last night, while scrolling through Facebook, on one of our local community pages, there was a person who complained that they had been assaulted, that they'd been injured needlessly by our local police and our police department in town, and that they had been wrongfully committed to a mental institution for a week um, by our local police. And now, look, I don't know what happened exactly. I know that they told a little bit about what happened, but I don't know the full story. Um, I don't put anything past the police. I know what the police can be like. But I also know that sometimes the police do have to use violence to do their job properly. And I just don't know if this was a case of that or a case of police abuse. Anyway, I did comment on it, and what I said was that if the police did in fact abuse this person, um, that I hope that they're able to get some justice, but it'll be an uphill battle for them for sure. Going against the police is not easy. And I also said that I don't know about their individual situation, but I do know that the police can be abusive. I've experienced it, and I know lots of other people who have too. And I've even had an experience one time of sitting in a restaurant in my hometown, and two police officers from our local police department were sitting at a nearby table trying to out douchebag each other, telling war stories and trying to out douchebag each other. And each of them talking about how they brutalize people just because they didn't like the person's attitude or whatever. They didn't feel the person was showing them enough fear or whatever, so they brutalized them. And how they had jacked people up by planting things on them or on their property, and how they had perjured themselves in court to put people in jail, and how they had leaned on witnesses to get witnesses to change their story so that they could put people in jail and all that business. And it was really pretty pathetic. And what was even more disturbing than that is the fact that they weren't afraid to openly talk about this in a public place. They weren't afraid of potential consequences. I mean, if I went out and I did the kinds of things they were talking about doing, I probably wouldn't be talking about it in a restaurant where there's people sitting at nearby tables that can hear every word I say, and where I'm basically confessing to a bunch of crimes, you know. But in their case, they weren't bothered because they weren't worried about consequences because they knew there'd be none, even if somebody said something. Anyway, so I mentioned all that because there were several people on there saying that they don't believe the police would do that. I do believe they would do it. I don't know if they did do it in this case because, as I said, sometimes they have to use physicality to do their job. And so I don't know which it was in that case. But anyway, a friend of mine this morning sent me a message. And the reason I'm referring to this person is this person, the person who was complaining about the police, is because I refuse to use pronouns. You know, I just refuse to do it. And this person, it turns out, is a transsexual. As near as I can tell, they were male and they've transitioned to female. But see, I don't use pronouns. I just won't do that. So that's why I'm referring to this person as this person. They are a person regardless of all the other stuff, but so I can accurately do that. But I'm not going to use pronouns. I just won't do that. I won't buy into all that stuff. And anyway, this friend of mine, he said, "Hey, did you happen to know that person you were supporting there on the Facebook there, did you showed some support for? Were you aware that that's a transsexual?" And I actually did look at their page because they were saying that they told the full story on social media, and I was hoping to find something, which I didn't. But I was hoping to find some account, at least their side of it, so that I could have a look and see what they were talking about exactly. I found their profile to be a real nasty dog's breakfast of things that really disgusted me, to be honest. There was virtually nothing on there that I could get behind or agree with. So I'm completely the opposite to this person as far as my personal beliefs and so on, and my philosophy. And I disagree with them about virtually everything. Like all the stuff that they put there. Now, they'd probably be just as disgusted if they looked at my Facebook profile, because mine is the opposite to theirs, So they'd probably be equally disgusted with me if they looked at mine. So yeah, and I figured out by looking at their profile that they are in fact the transsexual. But here's the thing. If they were abused by the police, that was still wrong. That still shouldn't have happened. And so even though this isn't somebody I agree with on any level, and this isn't somebody who I identify with on any level, I still, if they were actually abused by the police, I still believe that that was wrong. And anyway, my friend who sent me the message giving me the heads up that this person you supported is a transsexual, I let him know. I said, yes, I know. I figured it out. I said, I looked at their page and I figured it out. But I said, if the police did abuse them, that still shouldn't have happened. And then this guy started going off on me saying that, these people should be this and that. They should be killed. They should be beaten. The police were right to hurt them and on like that. And I said that, it's never right for the police to abuse a person, whether I like that person or not. I don't care who they are. I said they could be my enemy. And I would still say the police should not be abusing them. If the police have to use some physicality to do their job, that's one thing. And I mean, we have to allow them sometimes a little leeway so they can do their job. I'm not a big supporter of the police, as you know from previous videos, and you could probably tell by the tone of this video that I'm not a big supporter of the police. I'm also not a big supporter of the trans movement or the LGBTQ or the feminist movement. I'm not a big supporter of any of that. In fact, if anything, I'm a detractor when it comes to that stuff. I don't like it. But here's the thing. That's why I say I found this person's profile disgusting, and they'd probably find mine equally disgusting. But I still don't think that the police should abuse people. Doesn't matter who they are. Anyway, my friend was pretty mad at me because I wouldn't go along with the idea that I should support the police in abusing this person because they're a transsexual. And I kept trying to explain to him that I don't care what they are, the police should not abuse them. I don't care what they are. And I told him too, I said, look, in a country where the police are allowed to abuse a group of people, even if they're a group of people I don't identify with and I don't agree with, or I have issues with that group of people, I still have to acknowledge that if they can abuse one group of people, they can abuse another. And the police haven't just abused transsexuals and homosexuals, they've abused all kinds of people. Right now in Canada, Christians are being heavily abused by the police. I believe in God, I believe in Jesus. I can be abused by the police for that in this country right now. In fact, it's more likely that a Christian will be abused in Canada at this point than that a transsexual or homosexual will be. And I would hope that that woman or man or whatever, that transsexual person, I would hope that even if they looked at my profile and saw a whole bunch of stuff that they find disgusting and that they don't agree with and that they can't identify with, I would hope that they would still agree that the police should not abuse me. Even if they say, I think this guy's point of view is reprehensible and I disagree with it on every level, which is how I feel about them. I would hope that they would be open-minded enough to say, but still, he should not be abused by the police. Anyway, my friend was going on about how much he hates these different groups. I don't hate them to the degree he does, but I also don't support that movement at all. I think it's gone too far. I think they need to get out of the schools. I think we need to do away with all this story time with the transsexual guy in the dress and all that for the kids. I think we need to stop with all that. I don't support any of it. I think that it's right from the devil, this stuff. However, I also can't support the abuse of authority. And if that happened in this case, and I don't know if it did or it didn't, and I was clear about that in my comments, I was clear that I know it can happen. I was clear that I don't put it past the police to abuse people. I was clear that I myself have had the experience of being abused by the police. And I was also clear that I don't know what happened in this specific situation. So I'm limited as far as to having a specific opinion about what happened to that person. But my opinion in general is that if the police use physicality in a gratuitous way in order to impose their own personal opinion or their bias or their own prejudice, whatever that prejudice is, then that's wrong and they need to be held accountable for that, whether I like the person who's had the abuse done to them or not, whether this is somebody I'd want to hang out with or not. And I can tell you right now, that person is not somebody I would want to hang out with. We would have nothing in common. Really, we'd be completely on the opposite side of every issue. So, I mean, we wouldn't really make good friends. But that doesn't mean I think it's okay to brutalize them. And I certainly don't think it's okay for people in authority to brutalize them. And one thing I mentioned to my friend is that at this time in Canada, there are actually a lot of police officers who are members of the LGBTQ community due to affirmative hiring practices and so on. Especially in the cities. I think more so in the cities than in these rural areas. But still, the big city police departments for sure had to meet a quota. And so they had to hire so many ethnic minorities, so many women, so many disabled people, and so many members of the LGBTQ community. Well, so I told him, I said, look, there's a lot of police who support the LGBTQ. And in fact, there are police officers who are a part of that community themselves due to the affirmative hiring practices that we've had in the last few years, all this business about inclusion and everything. And so I said, any of them would probably hate you for taking the stand that you're taking. So I said, if the police officer hating somebody or hating what somebody is grounds for them to be allowed to beat that person up and to abuse that person, then if a homosexual if a police officer who happens to be a homosexual or a transsexual runs into you and they're aware that you don't like that sort of thing, then I suppose they should be allowed to beat you up, you know? if we follow that logic to its, we followed your argument to its logical conclusion, we'd have to say that. Anyway, he went off on another tirade like that. You know, he didn't like, he just felt like I was comparing apples to oranges and this and that and the other thing. But it's the same mentality, though. And that's what I told him. I said, look, if one person is not safe from being abused by authority figures in this country, then nobody is safe. Injustice for one person means injustice for all. And so that's the reason that I can't get behind the police on this matter if it happened the way this person says it did. Which again, I don't know. I mean, maybe the use of force was necessary. I wasn't there. Apparently there's video, at least a video that was taken in the police car. They don't have body cameras, but they have video cameras in their police cars. Apparently, there is video, at least in the police car. I haven't seen that. From what I hear, this person is trying to get that released now. I think they're going to have an uphill battle to get it released if it shows the police in a bad light. And from the sounds of things, they have had an uphill battle to get it released. But the bottom line is, whether I identify with what this person is, or whether I agree with what this person is, or with what their community is doing in the community, whether I agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. Nobody should be abused by authority figures. Nobody should be abused by the police or any other authority figure, regardless of who that person is. And I explained to my friend, I said, look, I think the reason that we disagree, really, I think it's a spiritual thing. Because I said, look, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus. As he was telling me, well, what, you think you're going to get somewhere agreeing with this person, supporting this person? You think you're going to change the world and all that? And it's like, no, I don't. And in fact, I don't support this person because I don't know their story. I know what they've said, but it's all very vague, and I haven't seen any proof of anything. I haven't seen proof that what they say is true or untrue, so I'm being very tentative as far as whether I support this person. I acknowledge that what they said happened may very well have happened, but I don't know it had happened, and I don't know it happened the way they said it did. So I can't just throw my full support behind them in this matter, but I at least will give them tentative support. And I'll at least acknowledge that what they're saying could happen, because there were a few people in comments that were saying absolutely not. The police never do that sort of thing. Well, I mean, sometimes they do. It's unfortunate, but sometimes they do. And so I'll at least support them in the sense that I'll acknowledge that what they're saying happened may have happened. But here's the thing, though, about it. My friend, he was saying, well, you know, you think you're going to change the world. You think you're going to... Well, no, I don't. But I also can't cheer for injustice and for abuse when it happens. And I also don't feel like I can just sit by and pretend that it doesn't happen when I know it does. And I feel that I'm called upon by God himself to speak up when these things happen. And no, I don't think I'm going to change the world. We're living in a fallen world. That's part of my belief system. And another part of my belief system is that it will remain a fallen world until Jesus comes back, and that Jesus will change it. And I told him, I said, look, if I believed that I was going to change the world, which is actually Jesus, it's his job to do that. I said, if I were to say I'm going to change the world, that would be blasphemy, because I'd be putting myself in Jesus's place. I'd be saying that I'm going to do Jesus's job. That's what the devil did with God. The devil said, I can do God's job better than him. I'm going to take his place because I can do it better. That's what the devil said. That's what got the devil into so much trouble. You know, that's why Lucifer got cast out of heaven, because he decided that he could take the place of Yahweh. He decided he could take the place of the king of the universe, of the creator of everything, including Lucifer. He created Lucifer, created everything, including Lucifer. And Lucifer decided that as the creation, he was greater than the creator, which makes absolutely no sense, but that's what he decided. If I were to say, I'm going to change the world, well, who am I? I'm not going to change anything, other than that I might have some positive effect in my local area, in my vicinity. I may in some way inspire somebody to be better by being better myself, or I may inspire somebody to be worse by being worse myself too. We do have that power. But in the end, no, I'm not going to uncorrupt this corrupted and fallen world. Only Jesus can do that, and he will do it at the appointed time. And in the meantime, we have to accept that we're living in a corrupted and fallen world. I accept, and I do accept it. But I still will always say that corruption and abuse of authority cannot just be idly accepted, because then we become complicit in it. And I mentioned how, basically I said, what you're saying is very similar to what the people in Germany said during the Holocaust. Because, the reason that Funny Mustache Man targeted the Jews to be scapegoats for all the problems is because it was an easy thing to do, because anti-Semitism was really prevalent in Europe at that time. People already were inclined to blame the Jewish people for their problems. And so it was an easy sell. And the thing is, so Funny Mustache Man, he's, yep, the Jews are responsible for all the bad things. We get rid of the Jews, we can build this beautiful world where the Aryan race runs everything. And, we get rid of all these corrupted outfits, these Jews and these others that are no good. And then we'll have a beautiful world. And, this was the whole thing about the Holocaust. And the people, for the most part, even if they didn't participate directly, even if they weren't working in the camps, and, even if they weren't ratting people out so they could be sent to the camps and all that, even if that wasn't happening with them, they supported it with their silence. And a lot of them said, well, I don't really like the Jews anyway, so yeah, whatever. Sure, the Jewish people are disappearing. Good, I don't like them. So I mean, well, and sure, so what if the police abuse the Jews? So what if the Jews are being abused by the government? So what? I don't like them anyway. But the thing is, nobody was free under that system. Even if you weren't a direct target, you still weren't free. And the same is true in the communist countries. Nobody's free under a communist system. There were certain groups that were targeted more so than others by the authorities, but nobody was free. I mean, you could live your life being totally obedient to the communist system, and your neighbor might want your apartment for their son or their daughter who's getting married. And they might run to the authorities and tell some bullshit story about you. They might say, he's been talking shit about the system. He's been complaining. He's been talking shit about the government. You won't believe what he said about Nicolae Ceausescu. He said terrible things about our leader. You won't believe what he said about Honecker. That was the leader in the East German section of the communist world. You won't believe it. You go to the Stasi, say, you won't believe what's being said about Honecker by my neighbor. Saying terrible subversive things. That neighbor would be picked up in the middle of the night and he wouldn't even know why. Him and his family would be bundled off to prison, never to be seen or heard from again. And then that apartment would open up, and then the neighbor whose son or daughter was getting married could move their son or daughter into that apartment. And they'd be given that apartment as a reward for dropping the dime on their neighbor who didn't even do anything. That's the kind of society those people had to live in. That's the sort of thing that happened every day. And so, if you have a tolerance for certain groups being targeted, like in that society, many people probably said, well, they make their own trouble. Those people who are being targeted, they're making their own trouble. But the thing is, nobody's safe and nobody's free. Even if you try to live the way the authorities tell you to live, and you don't express any negative opinions about the authorities or about the system, and you're just an obedient little slave, and you just always express gratitude to the system for providing you with crap, basically, and for not sending you to prison. That doesn't mean that someday you won't be sent to prison because you had one little misstep. You had a bad day and you said something you shouldn't have. Or, like I say, some bullshitting neighbor who was jealous of you or who wanted what you had decided they were going to get it by getting rid of you. And they were going to use the system to do it. So they told some story about you that wasn't even true. They said you said something you didn't say. They said you were mixed up with something you weren't mixed up with. And the next thing you know, you're gone, you've lost everything, and your rat neighbor now has what you had. And he has that until somebody sees that he has it and wants it, and they do the same shit to him. That's what happens. So basically what I told my friend is, it isn't a matter of supporting that person, their lifestyle or their beliefs or anything else. I mean, that person had things on their Facebook page, even really nasty. They had nasty things on there about God. Well, I love God. I don't like people saying nasty things about God, but I still don't think that they should be abused. It's as simple as that. I mean, like I say, if they can be abused, so can anyone else. My friend, he said, well, it's human rights is the problem. People have human rights. They shouldn't have human rights. And I said, would you like to live in a place where they don't have human rights? Would you like to live in East Germany in the 1970s? Or in Poland, where they didn't have any rights? Or in Czechoslovakia in the 60s and 70s and 80s? Would you like to live there? Do you know what it was like to live there? Because I've listened to people who lived in those countries. We have a man up here in Canada by the name of Arthur Pawlowski. You may have heard of him, I don't know. He's a minister. And when all the stuff was happening with the C-19, he actively went against the authorities. In Canada here, that wasn't his first battle with them. He was on the streets feeding the homeless and the destitute. And he'd feed anybody that came. Anybody wanted to eat, he'd feed them. And the government went after him for that because it's illegal in Canada to do that. I mean, it's illegal in Canada to feed a hungry person. That's how screwed up a place this is. And so he had all kinds of trouble with the government because he was doing that. And I guess you have to be sanctioned and licensed, and there's a lot of money. The homeless and destitute industry is big. And there are people, very powerful, wealthy people who are making a lot of money out of feeding the homeless people a few scraps. Arthur Pawlowski was feeding people who weren't allowed to go to those places for the most part, people who had been banned from the soup kitchens and so on because they were considered problematic. He was feeding the lowest, most lowly of the low people in our society because they got stomachs too and they got to eat too. Whether we like them or not, they have to eat. And he just showed them love and cared for them enough to do that regardless of what they were up to, what they had done. And for that, he fell into conflict with the authorities. When he was in jail during the C-19 thing, They actually, even the guards in there even incentivized other inmates, other prisoners to kill him. They were offering other prisoners rewards if they would just take Arthur Pawlowski out. They burnt down Arthur. They tried to. They didn't succeed, but they tried to burn down his house in the middle of the night. They loosened up the wheels on his truck. I mean, this is the stuff that they did. And so that's what we're dealing with here. And he's a Christian man. He's not a homosexual or a transsexual. He's a Christian man. He's actually a Christian minister. He has a church. And he's been severely abused by the government of Canada. But he's a Polish immigrant. He came here in the early 1990s. He escaped from Poland in 1990, right around the time the communism was collapsing, ironically. But he said he lived in hell, and he's described what it was like living in Poland during those communist years, and he said it was hell. And now he sees it happening here, and it worries him, and it should worry him. It should worry all of us. But here's the thing. Just listening to different people who have been through these experiences, who lived in these communist countries where people didn't have rights, I can't say that I like it. I can't say I want that. It's bad enough the way it is and the way it's been, but it'd be far worse, If things keep going like they're going, it'll get far worse. And, this movement, even this movement now of the LGBTQ, it's being used by people with evil agendas. Like, this isn't being done for their edification and for their enlightenment and for their betterment. This is being done to tear the rest of us down. And a lot of them don't realize that yet, but they're being used for diabolical purposes. And, the same people that are holding them up now are going to come for them in the end. It isn't going to be somebody like me that comes for them, because I believe everybody has a right to exist if God allows them to be here. So it isn't going to be me or anybody like me. It's going to be the people who are using them right now. But what happens with me is I get hate from both sides. I get hate from the side that upholds all that stuff and celebrates it, and I get hate from the side that wants to string all these people up and do away with them, because I'm at neither extreme. And so I get hate from both sides, and like I say, it is what it is. I mean, the Bible says that you'll be hated. Jesus said, if they hate me, they'll hate you more. You think they hated me, just wait. They're going to hate you more. He told us that, so we can expect that. Again, that's part of living in a fallen world. And no, I'm not going to change that. I'm not going to change it, but I don't have to participate in it. I don't have to become a part of that. And so anyway, that's what I told my friend. He told me he doesn't have any spiritual beliefs. And I said, well, that's all right. I said, look, you're entitled to that. I uphold you in that, but I disagree with you. Just to be clear, I do disagree with you about that. But he said, well, having spiritual beliefs gets you nowhere. Well, again, he's entitled to think that. I think he's wrong. And I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing. I mean, and even though I'm getting a lot of hate from both sides of the thing, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing because my conscience tells me that this is what I should be doing. Anyway, I got to get ready to start our day. Enough time has passed. It's a sunny day. It's a day when I can get things done. I have no excuse. If I don't get anything done today, I can't blame anybody but me. So I better get at it so I don't have to blame myself later. We'll see you in a little while.